Hey everyone, in this video lecture, we're covering the topic about the mechanisms of evolution. So we're going to be talking about how does evolution occur? How do we get that change in inherited traits in a population over time? So we need to go back and think about evolution in terms of alleles. So we're talking about how we see a change in inherited traits. Well, those inherited traits are really just alleles, genotypes. And for every individual, there are two alleles for a particular trait. So if we're talking about a change in inherited traits, evolution is also a change in allele frequencies in a particular gene pool. So in this example here, I have butterflies. This would represent their gene pool. So we see a certain amount of dominant A's here, uppercase A's, as well as recessive A's. So when we're talking about evolution, and we're going to come back to this gene pool idea, we want to look at how different processes may change the frequencies of these alleles in the gene pool. And so there are really four different processes that could result in a change in allele frequencies or result in evolution. And we're going to walk through each of these and look at how the percentage of dominant and recessive alleles change over time via these four processes. So we're going to start with natural selection. This is the famous one because of Charles Darwin's work. We'll probably go into this topic in more detail in a little bit in a separate video. But in terms of evolution in allele frequencies, we are looking at, in natural selection, we have an allele that gets favored. And that means that there's some outside force causing pressure for an allele to be favored over a different allele. And because the favored allele is surviving, it gets passed down to future offspring. So in this example, we have a gene pool. The percentage of the dominant allele is 35%. The percentage of the little a recessive allele is 65%. But we have this bluebird or blue jay here that is particularly targeting the little a alleles because it gives them a light phenotype. It makes them stand out on this blue background. So the blue jay is eating all the little a alleles. So because of natural selection through time, we see that there's been a change in allele frequency. The percentage of A alleles is now percentage of dominant big A alleles is 70%. The percentage of little a recessive alleles is now only 30%. Okay, so that would represent a change in allele frequency. So evolution is occurring. We are changing that population over time. Genetic drift is going to show similar change, but this is now, instead of an outside force putting pressure on which alleles are favored and which are not favored, we're talking about complete random events. So there are really two types of random events with genetic drift. There's a bottleneck effect and a founder effect. We're going to look at each of these and how they can randomly change allele frequencies. So with the bottleneck effect, you're going to get a change in those allele frequencies from some sort of like population crash. Your population gets really small, really fast. And it could be like a natural disaster that causes this. It could be any other random event that would drastically shrink the size of your population. So here I have my original population. So we see butterflies that are both blue and green. We see that the percentage of the dominant allele is 35%. The percentage of the recessive allele is 65%. But we have a random event that is going to wipe out a chunk of our population, and only this population that is circled here is going to survive this random natural disaster, this forest fire. So it didn't select particular alleles to survive. It was just really random, like who was near the fire, who wasn't. And so this new population, the percentage of the dominant allele is now 20%. The percentage of the recessive allele is 80%. So we have a change in allele frequency that would represent, again, evolution occurring. So now our population is going to be pretty much mostly these green butterflies. And that blue butterfly, if there's not a mate, if it doesn't pass on that trait, then that allele might even get wiped out entirely. Then also genetic drift, so still on the idea of a random event. The founder effect is when we get an entirely new population forming. So if I have my original population here on this little island, so we have blue butterflies and green butterflies. Again, with that starting allele frequency of 35% dominant, 65% recessive alleles. Founder effect would be we have a little bit of the original population moving and finding a new home. So they venture over to this new island and they start their own population. And just by chance, the ones that left and started this new population have a different allele frequency than the original population. So this again would represent evolution because we have a new population with a different allele frequency. The next type of processes that could change allele frequencies is gene flow. It's similar to the founder effect, but here we're talking about migration. So we get migration of individuals into a completely new population, which would change the allele frequencies. So in this case, if we look at the populations on either side of my mountain, they're both the same species of butterfly, but it's just by chance that population 1 was my green butterfly population and population 2 was the blue butterfly population. Well, if I have a butterfly and these two populations are separated by a mountain range, if one of my green butterflies decides to migrate and fly over the mountain chain over to population 2, my allele frequencies before and after that migration are going to change. So the green population before migration had 0% dominant alleles and 100% recessive alleles. The blue population had 100% dominant allele before migration and 0% after. Well, now that the butterfly has migrated over, we see a change in allele frequency. The green population is still sitting at the same frequencies, but my blue population is different. There's 91% of the population has the dominant allele, and there are now 9% of the gene pool has little a or recessive alleles. So it seems like a small shift, but it is a change in allele frequency. And so if this continually is happening, then we will see really change in traits and evolution occurring. And then the last type of process that can change allele frequencies is mutation. And this is where we get random changes in the DNA and a new allele appears. So if we have this population of butterflies and they just all happen to be little a genotypes to be green, and a mutation appears and all of a sudden we have one of those alleles mutating to the dominant allele and we get a new color, that again would represent evolution. So our allele frequency is now 5% dominant and 95% recessive. So again, we're talking about these 4 processes, all at which have changed that frequency of alleles in our population, indicating evolution has occurred.